this is probably the most uncomfortable experience for me that I can imagine. I am of Yaqui and Pima descent, and in both cases, photographs are prohibited. Videotapes are even worse. Because when you talk to somebody like you and I are talking, we're talking to spirit to spirit. My spirit is talking to yours, you're responding to me. When it comes to a photograph, and if you think about it, somebody takes your picture. That means they're taking something from you. And they may be using it in a way that you would never sanction having done. So when my grandmother told me that photographs take your soul, she was serious. And so I have avoided photographs most of my life, except for the things that are absolutely necessary, like passports and driver's licenses and church directories. But this experience of making the decision to engage this way, it was something I had to put to a lot of prayer, and be able to get to the place of saying, this is okay. And I got to thinking, part of the reason for coming to this decision is that if the only way that my voice can be heard is by doing this on videotape, I realize that the conference is going to be asking people to engage in things that are uncomfortable for them, to do listening that might not be comfortable for them. And if I'm going to be a part of asking people to do something that's not comfortable for them, then I have to be willing to engage in something that's not comfortable for me as well. And in that way, try to keep a balance, because balance is so important, at least for me as a Native American. If you take the word repentance, that's not just saying I'm sorry. I mean, when I bump into somebody, say in a grocery store in the line waiting to check out, if I bump into them, I'll say, I'm sorry, excuse me. There's no repentance involved in that. There's just this feeling of, oops, I did something wrong. Please excuse me. We aren't entering into any kind of a relationship. You're going your way, I'm going my way. When you talk about repentance, that requires lamentation. That requires thought. It requires relationship. And it's something that you can't do in a moment. It's something you can only do in a lifetime. And even then, one lifetime might not be enough. It may take several lifetimes, which means generations. I was thinking about the fact that in many Native American communities, and mine included, there is the thought that you look not only to yourself, but you look to the 7 generations into the future, which means you're planning for those 7 generations now. But you also have to look back to the 7 generations of the past, which means you get the lessons and the honor and respect for those 7 generations. My grandfather was born in 1890. That's only 2 generations removed from me. So if I go back those 7 generations, we're talking 200-300 years back. And when I look at what was happening 300 years ago, and I have to think about what is going to happen 300 years from now, it changes how I look at things. My Pima grandmother and I once had a conversation, and I tend to put on weight during the winter. And one day I was complaining to my grandmother that I had put on these 5 pounds of winter weight. And she said to me, well, how long did it take you to put those pounds on? And I said, well, Grandma, it took me the whole season. And she says, Danita, it's going to take you at least 2 seasons to take that off. And that's only if you're working on it every day. She was a wise woman. And it did take me 2 seasons to get that weight off. And I did have to work on it systematically, intentionally, every day. If you take that idea and apply it to this 300 years of 7 generations that I'm talking about, whatever happened in that period of time, it's not going to take 300 years to work it out. It might take 600 years to work it out. And that's working on it intentionally every day. It means teaching your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and doing it in such a way that the lessons are going to be perpetuated into the future even after you're gone. That's not teaching somebody a lesson. That's teaching them a lifestyle. The first step has to be listening. Looking for people that you can open up a relationship with and listen. It's going into it with an open heart to say, help me understand. Because stories carry the weight of everything. And listening with an open heart is not an easy thing to do. It's very, very difficult. It means having to stay quiet, yet open. And I think within many cultures where there is not the practice of listening, of just sitting quietly and hearing what's going on around you, or to hear beyond the words, to hear the emotions that are within and under the words. It's something you have to practice. And if you're not used to doing it, it's something you have to practice even harder. But that's the very first step, is to listen. The second step is to see. It's to go where the words take you, to join the person or the people in their journey, and to live with them. Sometimes that's a literal living with them in their homes, on their reservations, in their communities, at their ceremonies, whatever it is that they're doing, to engaging with people there and be able to then experience what they experience, the way that they experience. Because if you're always on the outside looking in, then you're always going to be putting a judgment on what you're seeing. And the idea behind listening and seeing is to remove all of that judgment and to enter into it and to be there. Those have to be the first two steps. Without it, you'll never get there. My name is decidedly Hispanic. It's a last name that my father took, not one that he was born with. And my mother is Hispanic, and so I got the name from her at her choice. So when I'm looked at by other people, usually, and especially because of my name, they see somebody who's Hispanic, even though I'm only a quarter Hispanic European and I'm 3/4 Native American. I grew up in a very dichotomous situation because we hid the fact that we were Native American. It was better to be Hispanic than it was to be Indian. It was less dangerous where we lived. When I came to live in Illinois, I worked for the Census Bureau for a while. And I got curious about the numbers. I knew that Illinois didn't have a reservation like Arizona does, which is where I'm from. But after working for the Census Bureau, I looked up numbers to find out what the numbers were. And at that time, Illinois had the highest number of self-identified Native Americans in a state without a reservation, which struck me as interesting. And shortly after that, I was approached by a local newspaper, and they asked me if I would write a column twice a month about the Hispanic viewpoint. And so I asked the editor if perhaps I could instead write something about the Native American viewpoint. And she said that that really wasn't necessary because there weren't any Native Americans in the state of Illinois. I countered with the fact that I had worked for the Census Bureau and that I knew what the statistics were, and I shared some of them with her, saying that there really were a lot more Native Americans here than she realized. Then she said that that really didn't matter anyway, because she was interested in what her viewers wanted to hear, what her readers wanted to hear. And her readers didn't want to hear about Native Americans. They wanted to hear about Hispanics. So, what's my experience of being a Native American in Illinois? It's being less than a minority, it's being invisible, it's basically being non existent. And that really was a lot of my experience growing up, hiding the fact that I'm Native American, not letting anybody know because it was okay to be Hispanic, but not Indian. I had an experience when I was in first grade. All of the little girls in my first grade class were invited to a sleepover on the weekend at another little girl's home, except me. It crushed me as a child. And I was very shy, very timid when I was little. On Monday, when we were at school, I garnered up every ounce of courage that I had. And I went up to that child and I asked her, why? Why didn't you invite me? And she looked at me almost with this look of surprise in her eyes. And she said, oh, I didn't even think about you. You don't exist? How do you stand up against that? How do you pick yourself up with that when you don't exist? That's the experience for a lot of Native Americans, not just in the state of Illinois, but in the United States. The Illinois Great Rivers Conference has this connection and relationship with a third world country. And it's been going on for years. It's wonderful. It gives people hope. It gives them something to do. It gives them a dream. We have third world countries in the United States. They're called reservations. But we don't have a relationship with those reservations. Or if we have them, they're very small and they're not consecutive years. There's no dream, there's no plan to make a difference. We can make a difference. So, what are my dreams? Wow, I would love to see United Methodist Women groups, just of this conference, adopt one Native American ministry. Just one. The way that they have adopted the Leslie Bates Davis House or the Cunningham Children's Home. Even a fraction of the attention that those groups give would mean such a difference and would make such a difference. I'd love to see a relationship between the churches within this conference with a Native American group. Just one. Not all of them, just one. I would love to see Dayspring Church, which is the Native American church here in this conference, become a church that people are proud to have connection with. Not just as members of the church, of that church, but as members of other churches saying, that's our group, and we're helping, we're doing something to make a difference for the Native Americans that are in our state. We don't have to look beyond the borders of Illinois to find Native American people. They're here. Those are some of the things I'd like to see for the church to do. Sure, I'd like to see a lot of other things happen, but we're talking church here. I would like to see relationship being built and being experienced. Because if you don't have relationship, you don't have anything. The bottom line for Native American communities is that you cannot be Native American by yourself. Sure, identity-wise, you can be of the heritage, but it really takes a community to practice your ceremony, to practice the different ways of life that we learn. We do it in a circle. You cannot be a circle by yourself. It takes other people being there. And the more people you have in the circle, the stronger it is. Because no matter who walks into that circle, we walk together, we work together, we fall together. But we also help each other get up, and we do that together.